Hey there, love. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to read your birth chart, your natal chart, astrology chart, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to make this a shorter, sweeter video. This is just kind of getting you familiar with what you're looking at because everybody's kind of at a different stage. So I'm going to show you from step one how to do this. Now, I like to use the website astro.com. So I'm going to be pulling this up as I teach you how to pull it up so that I make sure I'm not skipping any steps for you. So the first thing is, like I said, pull up astro.com. When you pull that up, you're going to see on the left side of the page those three little vertical lines right by horoscopes. So I want you to go ahead and click on that, and then it will say free horoscopes in a drop-down menu. You're going to click that. Then you'll see in that menu, down towards the bottom a little bit, horoscope drawings and data. Under that one, we're still going, we have extended chart selection. This is where you're going to go to get your chart. So if you're not a user, now I recommend just going ahead and creating an account. It is free. I think you can store like 100 charts or something in it. It's totally free until you want to store more charts. But if you don't feel like making an account right now, that's totally fine. You can do visitors for visitors with a user profile. Oh wait, I'm sorry, back up. For visitors who do not yet have a user profile. The first one, we'll get there. Okay, so it says enter birth data. That's what you're going to click, where it says enter birth data. So now we have this screen that says birth data entry. So you're going to put in your name, you're going to put in male, female, event, or other, doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything by the gender or lack thereof. It's the same chart. So put in whatever you feel you want to put in. And then enter your birthday, year, and time. Now, here's something about the time of birth. The exact time of birth is so important in astrology. It's so important that it can change the entire setting up of the chart. So if you don't know your exact birth time, if you think it's around something, I recommend having an astrologer. I can do this, or another astrologer can do this, to do something called rectification, rectifying your chart. But if you don't know your birth time, if you have an approximation, like let's say mom and dad said, oh, it's between 5 and 6 p.m., that means you don't know your birth time. So just go ahead where it says hour and put in unknown, okay? We're going to pull the chart without a time. I would rather pull a chart without a time if I don't have the exact time than get the time wrong. And I'll explain why here in a minute. But if you do know your time, go ahead and put that in. And also put in your city of birth. Okay, so I'm doing all of this with you at the same time. It should take a little second and then pull up the city and state, or city and country. It has pretty much everything in there. So once you've done that, you're going to go to continue. And now we've got a different screen here that says horoscope 4, and then you'll see different headings, round, spherical, all that. Just leave that alone. Here's what I do want you to change. Where it says chart drawing style. Keep that one. Go to zodiac and houses. We're getting there, guys. We're getting there. There we go. So click zodiac and houses. I'm going to screenshot some of this stuff and put it up on the screen here so you can see exactly what I'm looking at. It'll say house system default. You do not want default. Let me just give you a brief summary here. There are several different ways to draw up the chart. Basically, it's about the house systems. And I will get into teaching you about house systems later. Right now, I just want you to know how to pull this up. But the thing is, it's going to pull it up default in Placidus. That's the type of chart drawing it's going to do. I don't care for Placidus. A lot of his professional astrologers don't care for Placidus. We tend to use it for timing of events like transits and solar returns, but not for just a birth chart. So I use equal houses, You can also use whole sign houses. Both I'm okay with, but just those are the three main ones, is Placidus, whole, and equal. Just please, just don't break my heart and use Placidus. If you want to research it later and you decide, hey, that's the one for me, that's totally fine. But since I'm teaching you how I do it, I'm going to pull it with equal. So then we'll go to show the chart. Now, this video, I'm really just going to be explaining to you what you're looking at and how to start understanding like what the hell this thing is. So what you have in this circle chart is 12 pie slices. You'll see those little, around the wheel, or pizza slices or whatever. You see 12 of them. And each of those is a house. That's an area of life. So we start at AC, which is the ascendant, which is the same thing as the rising sign. That is your modus operandi. That is your approach. Some people say it's the mask that you wear. No, it's really not. The approach is the best way to look at that. So for example, I'm a Virgo rising. Virgo is very particular. They like order. They like things to make sense. They're kind of methodical and, like just organizational skills. They also are not super flashy. They like to come across as more clean cut and practical. They often have an emphasis on their health or their physical body. And they're service-oriented people too, because Virgo has so much to do with service. So that's going to be their approach. So, I'm going to want to help people, and I'm going to want to come across as reasonable and organized. So we start there at the ascendant. That begins your first house. That is the house of self, the physical body and the self. The second house is the house of your income and your values. And I'm making this kind of simple because I want you guys to get the meat and potatoes in one video, and then we can dive deeper into each thing later. The third house is the house of communication, early education, and siblings and neighbors, our immediate community. The fourth house is home, family, roots, how we were raised, anything domestic, parents, a lot of times mother. And the fifth house is the house of, we say, recreation and procreation. So sports, children, sex, short-term love affairs. Or when I say short-term love affairs, I mean relationships, but they don't necessarily go into a long-term marriage. The sixth house is the house of health, routine. Pets actually fall under the sixth house too, but daily routine and health are the main things we think of with the sixth house. The seventh house is the house of marriage, long-term partnerships, legal issues, and a weird one that I don't use very much, but just so you know, the house of open enemies. So people that don't like you. Okay, and then we have the eighth house. The eighth house is the house of death, other people's money, like taxes, inheritances. It's also Scorpio's house, so it has a lot to do with mediumship, or the things that are beyond, or the things that are very deep and dark secrets. This is the house of like deep intimacy. So the kind of sex, for example, like the fifth house would be the kind of sex that you have with somebody that you just hook up with randomly. And the eighth house would be that like, we're so in love, and this is this deep transformative experience. This is this mind, body, soul experience. That's the eighth house. So Scorpio's house. And then the ninth house is the house of the higher mind, learning, college, like postgraduate school, foreign issues, travel, like traveling long distances. It's very philosophical. Politics, religion. The 10th house is the house of career and reputation. And the 11th house is the house of friendships and broader community. It's the house of like philanthropy, nonprofits, dreams, wish fulfillment. It's this house that's like, if you think about your friend group, then you're going to think about the 11th house. And then we have the 12th house, which is really the most difficult house to describe because it's the things that are hidden and inaccessible to us. The 12th house is this beyond the veil kind of thing. It's a very psychic house. But if we go back to traditional astrology, and this is still something that you should keep in mind, this is the house of self-undoing. It's the house that we can really find some dark stuff in. So for example, if you have somebody who has Neptune in their 12th house, depending on what else is happening in their chart, there may be a very good chance that there's substance abuse there. And we'll get into that when we get into the planets. But I'm just trying to tell you right now what these are. Okay, so now that you understand the houses, the next thing that you need to understand are what we call the angles, which is weird because this is a circle, but it has angles. So you see where the ascendant is, that AC. If you take that line all the way across, it goes into the 7th house. That's going to be the descendant. So if you think ascendant is me, descendant is other people. That's the most pivotal place in your chart for relationships, like deep relationships, big time relationships. Okay, like for example, if you had Jupiter crossing your descendant, there is a damn good chance that you're going to meet somebody or be with somebody who is like the love of your life, or it may be expanding your love life in some really beautiful way. Okay, so we have the ascendant, descendant axis. The other one we have, so that's the horizontal one. The other one we have is the vertical one. So you see at the top of the chart, it says MC. That is the midheaven or medium coeli. So we call it midheaven though. And the midheaven is really the pinnacle point for your career and your reputation. And it's kind of the things that push us out into the world. Oftentimes, the sign that the midheaven is under or planets that are aspecting it or sitting really close to it can describe the dominant parent. There's a lot of debate in astrology about which is the father and mother point in the chart. Most people would agree that the midheaven is the father part or the dominant parent, the parent that was out there doing the stuff, right? They were out there working or they were out there in the world. Then we have opposite of that, the IC, the Imam Coeli. Now, you can't see it marked on this chart, just like you can't see the descendant marked on this chart, but it's at the same degree that the midheaven is. So in this chart that I pulled, the midheaven is at 8 degrees of Capricorn. That means that directly opposite of that, at 8 degrees Cancer, you're going to have your IC. This is going to really express what it was like for the native growing up, what kind of home life they had, especially if you have planets sitting right by that. So for example, I have Saturn sitting right on my IC, very, very close to it, like 4 degrees away. I think 3 degrees away. And Saturn is a planet about responsibility and restriction. And I was an only child, and I had a lot of that growing up. I had a lot of early responsibility. You know, I was the kid that was, you know, doing their own laundry when they were 7. So I've seen that a lot with people with Saturn there. But you'll get to this stuff later. We're not getting into all the planets right now. But those are the angles. The next thing that I want to express to you is, of course, the planets. So you see the symbols for all of the planets there and where they fall. And if you don't know what that symbol is, you scroll down and you see this graph down at the bottom that says sun, moon, you know, and you can see the symbol for it. And it also tells you the degree. So you'll see down there a number. For example, in this chart that I pulled, it's 10 degrees Taurus. But then you'll see some numbers after that, like 34. It tells you how close to the next degree it is. So if you had one that was like 34 degrees and, or not 34 degrees, I'm sorry, 10 degrees and 34, you would know it's right there in the middle. But if it was like 10 degrees and 59, you might as well call it 11 degrees because it's just about at 11. I hope that makes sense. Okay, the other thing is you're going to see down there in this chart at the bottom, it looks like a grid. This is going to tell you the aspects. The aspects are really where a chart comes alive. And so not to get into how to interpret it yet, but I'm just going to explain what it is, okay? So you see angles or aspects here, and they all have symbols. And you can look up those symbols. I'm going to actually throw them up here on the screen if you want to like screen grab it or pause it and write it down. But you can see what all of the angles are, or the angles, I keep saying that, aspects are. Aspects are how the planets are communicating with one another and therefore modifying one another. We really are looking for very tight, close orbs. And let me explain that, because I just spoke French, right? Okay, a 0 degree aspect is the strongest. For example, a conjunction is when two planets sit next to each other. And if they move away and they're about 2 degrees apart, that's still pretty strong. But if they're like 10 degrees apart, that's a very wide conjunction. It's not going to have a very strong effect in that person's chart. The closer it is to 0, the stronger that person is going to act out that aspect. So we have several different major aspects, and I will talk about one of the minor aspects because it's still very important. Even though it's a minor, it's major, and that's an in conjunction or a quincunx. Nobody likes to say quincunx, so we all say in conjunction. But we have conjunctions, which are where the planets sit next to each other. We have squares, which are tense, and they are like difficult aspects. The planets are not cooperating so well. There's a tension. A square is 90 degrees apart. We have an opposition, which is 180 degrees apart, also difficult. Then we have a trine, which is 120 degrees apart. That's a very easy aspect, nice flow between those planets. They're cooperating. And we have sextile, which is similar to a trine. It's 60 degrees apart, but it is more of an opportunity for that to play out. The native has that ability, but they have to work with it to turn it on, so to speak. The trine, it just flows. And then we have an in conjunction, which is not a major aspect, but is still a major big deal. And that one, we only use an orb of 2 degrees. Now, when I go into my aspect video, we'll get into all this, but I just want you to understand what these are and how they work. So generally speaking, to just make it easier on yourself, major aspects, you don't want to go further than 5 degrees apart unless the sun or the moon are involved. Then you can go up to 10 degrees. Okay, so let's see. At this point, you understand that there are houses, planets, angles, and aspects. So you're getting really, really a big understanding of how to start to read this chart. And the last thing I will leave you with is how it's done. Okay, so in this chart that I pulled, this imaginary chart, I see that there is Venus in the 3rd house in Gemini, making a trine to Uranus, a sextile to the ascendant, and a trine to Mars. Okay, so what I'm going to do to interpret this person's Venus is I'm going to start with saying, okay, a 3rd house Venus. They really really love to talk. They probably have a pleasant voice. There's a good chance of that. They may really love to write. Communication is just a big deal for them. And then I'm going to say, okay, it's in Gemini. So now we know that there's a curiosity, and in love, they're going to really want somebody that is just as curious and interested in the world and chatty. That's something that's going to be exciting to them. So then I'm taking the house and the sign, and then I'm looking at the aspects, and I'm going, okay, and it's trine to Mars. So really they have synchronicity between what they like what they value, what they love, and how they love, and how they go after it, which is Mars. So I just bring all of these things in. So we're modifying. It's like adding ingredients until we get to the root of what that Venus is doing. The last thing that I will leave you with is some people go, oh my God, I have empty houses. Like my, for example, one that really freaks people out is when their 7th house, the house of marriage, is empty. Mine's empty. it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's empty, because what you do, and again, we'll get into this later, is you will look at the ruler of the sign of that house, and then you'll go and look at that and understand what's happening. So just to give you a little glimpse, okay? So this chart this imaginary chart that I put in, let's pretend that it has nothing in the 7th house. It actually does, but let's pretend it has nothing in the 7th house. So it is ruled by Libra. Libra's planet, the planet that rules Libra, is Venus. So I will go and look at this person's Venus and see how is it aspected. Those aspects are really important. What is it doing? That Venus is going to tell me about their house of marriage. Okay, I will leave you with that. That is how to pull up your birth chart. We will get into all of the juicy details in another video, but I'm so glad that you watched. And if you have questions, please tell me. I would love to hear them. You can send me a message or you can leave me a comment. I also have my phone number listed here on my Patreon, so you are welcome to text me. See you later, guys.